Welcome back again. You're still watching us here on the Daily Debate, and I'm joined in the studio with Dr. Cherif Amir, who is a professor of international relations. Good evening, and thank you, Doctor, for joining us.
Good evening.
The President's speech was very crucial. Very important and valid points were mentioned during his speech that tackled basically everything that's happening, all the way from the efforts that Egypt is exerting internally to the situation in Libya to the Nile waters. Let's have a brief scoop on the President's important speech that was held yesterday.
Well, the first point is that the President's speech yesterday had this crucial, as you said, importance because all the media outside of Egypt, the foreign media, started focusing on his words. Why? Because we have witnessed the last few weeks, Mr. Macron spoke, Mr. Erdogan said his word, Mr. Konstantinos in Greece said his word. Everyone made declarations except President Sisi studied well the issue, and he said when there will be the international community gathered, I will say the correct words at the time. And this was very, very wise. So we kept silent for a while because we have to study what's going on in the Eastern Mediterranean, what's going on in Libya, what's going on with Ethiopia. And I think that the General Assembly is for this purpose, so that every president comes and opens all the files in front of everyone. This is transparency, this is power, this is diplomacy. And I think that the president made his point yesterday. All his counterparts, with all my respects, made declarations weeks before and wasted some time, but they had to work on this in front of the international community in the UN. I think that President Sisi spoke clearly about Libya, and that it is an issue that is not concerning only Libya, it concerns all the region, and it's an international point of destabilization. He said it clearly that there is a red line. This red line would be respected because it's about the sovereignty of Egypt. There is another point also. It's about what is going on in the Eastern Mediterranean. We all know that there is international accords signed between Egypt, Cyprus, Greece, and we all know that the French and the EU are accepting this as an international act between the countries, and the international law agrees upon it. So we don't understand why there is all this trouble made by Erdogan in Turkey in the Eastern Mediterranean. If Egypt has the right to...
Or in Turkey, which is like a bit far away to imagine from the borders of Turkey in the first place.
Exactly. Well, I always say the Turkish regime because I consider the people of Turkey, they're under oppression. Lots of them, you look, for example, the journalists, they are in prison, the army officers in prison, the professors are in, all those who are voicing some concern, they are thrown in prison. So it's one man making all this trouble in the Eastern Mediterranean. So we are not trying to go along his plans in this boiling situation. We want, this is what President Sisi showed the world. We want the whole world to witness really what's going on. And there is international accords between Egypt, Cyprus, and Greece. And the French are present now in the Eastern Mediterranean. Our friends also in Russia are present. They are witnessing that we are going along with international law.
Yeah, Doctor, what you mentioned is also very triggering because President Sisi was not only very clear and honest, but there have been a lot of maturity, political maturity and diplomatic maturity in addressing the United Nations, because I believe he was the only president who actually told the UN right there at the speech that they need to stop supporting these countries that support terrorists or being blind-eyed, if I may correctly correct what he said, turn an eye blind to support some of these countries to terrorists, whether with money and weapons or providing safe havens, media and political platforms. And that's not the first time President Sisi says this clearly. He said it a number of times, but it seems to be there's a message that is sent today, is that you as the United Nations, 75 years in process, you need to really start standing up to your resolutions, to your role, and performing your tasks as it should be, because it's just, it doesn't make sense. I mean, there's law and order in the world, and if there's no law and order in the world, then every country should have the right to do what they think is right for their people and for protecting their security. This statement, what does this indicate to the role Egypt has reached today internationally?
It's a statement that would not be said except by a leader who knows the rules of this game, if I call it like that, in this region, who understands very well geopolitics, who understands that he has an important position in the international law as a country, in economy, in armed forces, geopolitically. He knows that Egypt now is leading the African continent in its development. We have endorsed the peace process that is going on now between the Gulf states and our brothers in the Gulf states and Israel. So Egypt now is having a major role, and now when he comes to the UN and speaks out about these concerns, he knows that everyone would listen, because no one would gamble in creating any problems with for instance, the Egyptian Navy, which is a superb navy. As the Israeli experts said, it's not even our words, it's the words of the other part of the region. They're saying it's a superb navy. So I think that the message is clear when the head of the armed forces of the Egyptian army says it clear to the West: look, we want peace, we want stability, but listen, there are rogue countries or rogue regimes, let's call it like that, who are acting against peace. That does not mean that we will keep silent. And that's why President Sisi related all that with the red line.
Yes, I was just going to speak about that, pardon me for there, but speaking of the red line, because again, for a president who's a man of action, more than words, and that's, I would like to put 10,000 red lines under this, being a man of action, keeping up with exactly what you say. He reiterated that if the fighting in Libya continues and crosses this red line of Sirte or Jufra, Egypt will be confronting national security. And again, that's whether they consider it warning or whatever it is, challenging, this is going to be a fact. Taking action of drawing this red line, again, what importance is it, and what does this indicate again and reflect to the role of Egypt?
It's an excellent question, because President Sisi, when he made this declaration in Egypt, some of the media against, like Al Jazeera and others, said, well, these words are just used to the people in Egypt to make them sense that there is a danger. So President Sisi was very, very clear. Well, I said it to the international community, not to the people of Egypt. They thought that he will never do it. Well, he did it. And he went in New York in front of all the international community, and he said, okay, I'll repeat it again if you think that I'm saying this to the Egyptians only. No, I'm saying it to all the more than 180 countries in the world, telling them there is a red line.
I didn't draw it, basically, in case people think, because again, you know, when you mention such kind of media, I wouldn't call them media outlets, but you wouldn't be surprised if they really think that a line was drawn. That's not the sense. It's just a rhetoric way of saying it. The feedback or the reaction to the world leaders concerning President Sisi's speech is also something that's very triggering. The speech was held around 24 hours ago, so they've been, as you said, the foreign media was very aware and we're waiting for this speech to come in. What can you tell us from what you've read, the feedback?
The feedback is that Egypt now is voicing many its concerns, let's say it like that, about many issues. The fact that we are endorsing peace in the Middle East, that does not mean that we have forgotten all the other cases. About the Renaissance Dam, for example, of Ethiopia, President Sisi made it clear to the whole world that we are a nation of peace. We are willing to negotiate, but we are also a nation which will act to guarantee its sovereignty. And this and diplomacy means a lot, that you have several cards in your hand.
Yes, you're still willing to be patient on it, because again, analysts said, well, the conclusion of what President Sisi said was not very different. There was the same messages being echoed despite the different complicated files. So the message that was reflected from what he mentioned in terms of statements on Libya were very much the same when he spoke about Ethiopia and the Renaissance Dam, and that is the sovereignty and the stability and peace and security of the Egyptian people. Again, putting these two different files on one track, and the red line, which is putting your people's interests and security and stability first. What would that help in with regards to the negotiations and the disagreements around the filling and the operating of the Grand Dam?
It's a way of telling the world to be the witness now. We have worked, first of all, with the Ethiopians, then with the Sudanese and the Ethiopians, then with the African Union, then with the Russians, then with the Chinese, then with the Americans, about what's going on, even the International Monetary Fund. So now I think that President Sisi is making it clear, and the Security Council, of course, that once again, I'm telling all the countries in the world to be witness of Egypt's patience. We're still waiting for a solution, because I think that many times our enemies try to portray Egypt as the country who does not wish to see the development of Ethiopia. We never said so. President Sisi always used the word our brothers in Ethiopia. He thinks and he sees things as brotherhood. Politics is another thing. So we are never against the development of economy of any African country. Although things went wrong in some negotiations, but still we endorse the Ethiopian people. They live here as refugees. As President Sisi said, we have 5 million refugees here, and they live very peacefully.
He didn't say refugees, did he? He said migrants, which is a big difference.
Because in front of the UN international law, they're titled in refugees. So we are telling the international
But we're not taking
law,
any help from any organization like any other country to support these people.
We are showing the world that we are a country who is open to all those who are discriminated and victims of wars, whether in South Sudan, whether in Ethiopia, in Eritrea, Libya, any country. Even when the disaster happened in Beirut, we were the first to offer the help. Now look at the disaster and the floods in Sudan. We are there, we are present. Our armed forces is present to help them there.
Which again reflects what other fake media would say, that we seriously need help internally, which is not the case. And this is something we're going to talk right after the break, and that is the President's insurance to always mention the will and the support of the Egyptian people to the change, and how far we have come during the past 6 years, and the number of projects that have been inaugurated on different levels, and how development has been ongoing despite the COVID-19 pandemic, which is a world challenge that Egypt has faced very bravely during the past 6 months. We'll be back right after this break. Please stay tuned.
The United Nations General Assembly in New York kicked off on Tuesday, where Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry delivered the Egyptian statement. In his speech commemorating the 75th anniversary of the United Nations Egyptian Foreign Minister, Sameh Shoukry has affirmed the Egyptian stance on combating terrorism, highlighting the need to face states that employ terrorism to achieve political and ideological goals. In his speech, Shoukry explained the Egyptian vision for dealing with the current global issues and the challenges, including preserving the international peace and security. Shoukry highlighted the need to combat the extremism and the organized crime, as well as removing weapons of mass destruction. He also urged drafting effective rules to ensure the cyber and the information security, as well as reforming the structures of the institutions concerned with preserving the global security and peace, especially the United Nations Security Council. Concerning the water issues, The Egyptian top diplomat said that the use of the transboundary waters must be in accordance with the international law and called for avoiding the unilateral actions that would affect the lives of people in the other societies. On the environmental level, Shukri said that Egypt aims at limiting the emissions contributing in global warming and the climate change and encourages a balanced approach coping with the negative effects of the phenomenon. Shukri's speech also underscored the need to protect the human rights and combat the racial discrimination and hatred. He called for empowering the young people and women, effectively responding to the health crisis, allowing access to the comprehensive health care, enabling the legal migration, and preserving the rights of migrants. The Egyptian foreign minister called for ensuring the flow of the knowledge, transferring technology, and working to reform the international trade system. Shukri ended the speech by affirming the Egyptian commitment to the values of equality among the people and the sovereignty of nations, avoiding polarization, enhancing partnership among the European Union member states and the UN member states, respecting the cultural characteristics of the societies, as well as maintaining the global system governed by the international law.
Welcome back again. You're still joining us here on the Daily Debate. I'm still joined in with Dr. Cherif Amir, Professor of International Relations. And Doctor, before we went out to this report, we were talking about the President, who also stressed during his speech that if it wasn't for the support of the Egyptian institutions and the people, that Egypt would not be able or would not have been able to reach to this stage of stability, specifically during the COVID-19 pandemic, unlike maybe what many other countries thought the opposite or expected the opposite to happen to Egypt around the world. Again, what does this reflect to the world on the over 100 million people living in Egypt as a nation, as citizens living in this land?
It reflects that that the people of Egypt are determined to go on in all aspects. Let's take, for example, some calls that were made from some individuals to destabilize Egypt last week. Look at the Egyptian people. They went to work. They want to work, as the president said. They want to build Egypt. They're not listening to anyone, like it happened in 2011 and the fake media who worked to destabilize the region. Now the people are very aware. The people of Egypt do not want to waste time in these
and they've also held the burden for so long.
Of course.
And we're seeing where the money is going and what's happening. Nobody is willing to go back at all to what before 2011.
That's thanks to the president himself, who said it from first day, that we will work
hard
and we will choose the hard way because we have no other choice. He wasn't giving any promises of dreams, but he said it will be hard, but we will be on the right track. And we have seen, as you said, after the COVID-19 wave, first wave, as they call it, we went through it, thank God. We are prepared. And now,
I mean, it's not a compliment to say that it's even surpassing developed countries which had proven that their health and systems were not that solid as we thought.
Of course, because we have worked, the media, you in the media have done a great work in making the people aware about the danger that's taking place. The country had a partial lockdown so that the economy would not fall. They thought that Egypt will have to make a full lockdown, which will...
All people would die in millions, thank God, God bless.
And well, it was very well studied, because we had also our armed forces prepared from the first day in working in every aspect to clean up, disinfecting, and universities everywhere, and everything went according to the plan. I repeat, this is very hard, it's not easy. And the people are carrying a heavy burden, but this is the only way.
Look, it's worth it. It's worth it.
After the Second World War, look at the Americans and the Russians and the British. They paid a heavy price to rebuild their economies again. So we had the same problem. We had the same problem after 2011 and the dictatorship in 2013, and when the people made the revolution, and then in June 30th, and then President Sisi was elected, democratically elected. Now we started working together. You know why the people are accepting all these hardships? Because it was the first time in the history of the Egyptians, they said democratically the world, and they said we chose this man to lead us. So they know that what we are, if we are suffering from something, because this is our choice, and we know this is for the next generation. We don't want to suffer like other countries. God forbid, with all my respects, but look what's happened in Libya, in Yemen, in Syria, all these destructions. When I see, for example, in northern Syria, army patrols of the Russians and the Americans going side by side on the land of Syria, where is the sovereignty of the country?
Or forcing people out of hunger and hopelessness to actually turn into terrorists, join organizations and go interfere in other countries' internal affairs. That's also very sad to see.
And Erdogan, who goes into Idlib like that and forces the people to pay with the Turkish lira, as if the Syrian sovereignty does not exist. We have avoided all that with a price. But let's see, now that there is peace starting to be established in the Middle East, and by the way, President Sisi yesterday...
Egypt has a very big role in this, to be honest.
Of course.
The creation, we see the tripartite meeting between Iraq, Jordan and Egypt, which has been held like 2-3 times in less than a year. Again, that's another triggering to the new Middle East agenda.
His Majesty King Abdullah of Jordan said that he respects President Sisi because he has a huge burden of 100 million people with all these obstacles, and he's working 24 hours a day to work to stabilize the region and to help the Egyptians go through.
Which wasn't his fault anyway. He's just coming to fix other people's faults, and I just hope people would be aware of that. But they are aware, and that's something we should also salute Egyptians for. The president had another spectacular statement during his speech, because especially with the issue of human rights and democracy, as you've just spoke about, and the liberties and guaranteeing the rights and liberties of nations, they always pinpoint to Egypt in this regard, as if they're blind on what's really happening in neighboring countries. But that's not the case. The case is that President Sisi, again, he's showing them role models of Egypt and how Egypt has achieved democracy. We have a constitution that we respect. We have law and order and regulations we respect. We have a parliament, and we're going to have elections for it. We have a Senate, and we had elections. So it's like, to be really honest, frankly, we're teaching you now what democracy is. Don't come and talk to us about human rights anymore. That message in particular, especially to the Western countries, you know, human rights and democracy sort of electrifies them. What does this again reflect?
It reflects, first of all, that Egypt is a country who has sovereignty, as every country in the world has its own rules. Look, for example, at the moment that we're talking in Portland, in the United States, there are riots, and the police are trying to arrest those who are making the violence. Well, why it's permitted in some countries and not the other countries? In France,
the yellow vests.
The yellow vests.
Every Saturday, it's been going for ages that we even got used to it.
Yeah, and the police uses all the force they can use, and they arrest people. So we are not telling them this is against human rights. This is law and order. Law and order, it's very important. So what President Sisi showed the world at a certain time, that there is law and order and sovereignty. But if anyone wants to express his opinion, we are 100 million people. Of course, there will be different opinions.
And the country accepts that, and that's what people are not aware of.
Yes,
I mean, I would accept you having a different opinions with regard that you would respect the law and regulations, my privacy and my rights, and not sort of leading terrorist organizations undercover.
Let me show you something very important that President Sisi have done, which was surprising to those who were, well, trying to say, well, the youth, the young people, they will one day go on the streets and say no. The conferences with the youth. He made all these conferences and he gathered them and he told them, I want to listen to you. What do you have to say? They expressed everything live on TV. And they asked the president questions and he answered the questions. And see, afterwards, the international media, well, they calm down in a way because the young people...
Honestly speaking, Doctor, there has not been any president in history who actually spared his time to sit and listen to youth and share with them ideas and go for simulation programs.
Yes,
I mean, seriously speaking, we need to salute that step as well. Now, you spoke of youth forums, and here I want to ask you about a specific forum, which is the Aswan Forum for Sustainable Peace and Development that took place last year. President Sisi did call during this forum on the African leaders to unite their efforts to face the challenge, to establish stability and peace in the continent. Now, being Egypt and Libya part of the African continent does not also reject the fact that all eyes are on the African continent that is very rich in resources, yet has a lot of challenges, poverty, health issues, educational illiteracy issues that needs to be resolved and will never be resolved unless the countries are united. The role that the African countries or the African continent is playing today, led by Egypt, how is that being viewed by the world?
Well, when Egypt began its presidency for the African Union, President Sisi innovated something that was never held before in the continent, which was the economic gathering and economic organizations of some countries. And this is the same model of the European Union when they started as an economic alliance. This is the first step. And President Sisi gathered the presidents of every country in Africa and told them we have to work on economy. Why work on the economy? Because unfortunately this continent was dependent on the West for decades. And then the Chinese came in, and then the Russians came in, and President Sisi highlighted a very important topic to the youth in Africa, that you are the generation which will build your economy, because the gates of Europe are closed now. Europe, it's witnessing its, I don't want to say decline, but let's say troubles economically, socially, and we have seen in every elections there, they choose the right wing who are saying that enough immigration, we will not accept any immigration anymore. So President Sisi focused on that the youth in Africa have to stay in Africa, work and develop their countries. Of course, there is several obstacles. One of them is illiteracy, as you said, civil wars. We have worked, President Sisi has done a tremendous effort. And
the latest, I believe, is the one between South Sudan as well and Sudan, which is, well, we've had representative from Salva Kiir's office yesterday calling on President to kindly attend the agreement ceremony, which would be signed very soon.
This new country was devastated in wars. So I think that it was clear that Egypt is working into the continent. And the final word is that President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi gave a clear message to the world. I'm a leader who wants to work with everyone for development, peace, stability. But I'm still the head of a nation which has a strong army, strong diplomacy, who knows when and how to defend its sovereignty.
Of course, and protect its people.
Of course.
On the front line, unlike other countries who really don't care much about their people. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Cherif Amir, Professor of International Law. Thank you very much for joining me here on the Daily Debate. That brings us to the end of our episode. Thank you very much for watching.